Welcome to Navigating Life with Vision Loss, an Aftersight original podcast. In each episode, we share stories, insights, and practical advice to help you navigate the journey of living with low vision or blindness. Together, we'll embrace each step with courage, grace, and hope.
Hello, this is Kim Wardlow. I am your host for Navigating Life with Vision Loss, and we are in the middle of our safety series. And we've been talking about all different aspects of safety, and today we're going to focus on fraud and safety, because what you don't know can hurt you, at least in this case. I'm really excited to have Heidi Gassman with me today. She is an attorney specializing in trust estates and fraud prevention. She's been practicing for 30 years and actually started out as a prosecutor before transitioning into what she's doing today. So Heidi, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
We're excited. How did you first get started in fraud, the work of fraud prevention, where I know you started out as a prosecutor?
Yep. And that was only the first 4 years or so of my practice. I actually got started with working with people to deal with and prevent fraud probably around 2001 or 2002 when I had my first case of real estate fraud and theft from an elderly client, which was a very unfortunate situation, but I managed that, and it just got me started down that path of addressing and dealing with it.
Well, I know you've had, just as we've had lunch together and conversations you've had many experiences, I guess somewhat unfortunately, with fraud. What makes this so personal and meaningful for you to work in this area?
I believe that in my work, one of the things I love about the work I do is that I can really make a positive difference in people's lives. I used to do litigation. I gave that up about 11 years or so ago because I would just rather work with people individually to give them certainty and security and safety. And in that process, I have seen unfortunately, so many things come up between married couples, with children, with people totally outside of a family who take advantage of people. And if I can do anything to head that off or rectify it, that is what gets me out of bed in the morning.
Well, that is wonderful, and we need folks like you to be looking out for all of us. You see a lot of this. You're seeing a lot of fraud. Is it increasing?
It increased in 2020, 2021, and I don't know if that was a symptom of the pandemic or if that just happened to correlate. But I've seen a little bit less of it recently in terms of real estate and more in terms of phishing and junk email, junk text, and taking advantage of people, not necessarily people with vision loss or low vision, but people who may have cognitive difficulties and who don't recognize that this is someone preying on them. So one of the things I definitely want to talk about today is how to potentially recognize that and guard against it.
That is so important. Being able to prevent something is so much better than having to deal with the repercussions if something happens to you.
Yes, it is. Once the money's gone or the asset is gone, more so with cash, it can be really difficult to get it back.
For sure. So let's talk a little bit about what fraud looks like. If somebody's never experienced fraud, maybe he's never known anybody who's experienced fraud, what might it look like in those early stages?
When it comes from somewhere outside of the family, what you want to look for is something out of the norm. It's if you think back to, what was this on Sesame Street? One of these things doesn't look like the other, right?
Right.
Which can be tough, but I think my best example of it was that very first case I talked about, where as a woman, she was 93 years old. She lived outside of Seattle. And very, very sweet, had no children, no siblings. Obviously, her parents were deceased. So she didn't have anything that we think of as traditional family, close or further relatives. And one day, a guy just showed up mowing her lawn. And she came out of her house and said, "Who are you and why are you mowing my lawn?" He said, "Oh, I'm so and so." She said, "Stop. I didn't ask you to do this. Go away." 2 weeks later, he showed up again, doing the same thing. And she asked him, "Hey, why are you doing this?" She didn't remember him necessarily from before, but said, "Look, I didn't ask you to do this. You need to leave." He showed up a third time. And that third time, because fraudsters are persistent, she said, "Oh, well, you seem like a nice guy. I recognize you from before. Okay, go ahead and mow my lawn, and here's $20." That unfortunately graduated to him causing her to sign a new will, giving everything to him. And he sold her house out from under her without her even knowing.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
there was someone at the escrow company, that's Washington's title version of title, that was complicit. We never found them, but it ended up being, she lost everything. And I was part of a team. We had an assistant prosecutor who was prosecuting the fraudster for felonious fraud. We had a team dealing with the foreclosure on her house because she didn't have a mortgage and it was sold out from under her. And suddenly there was this new mortgage. And then I was on the team dealing with getting her will back in place because she had left everything to her church, not to this guy. So that's a pretty extreme example. But when you have someone who appears out of nowhere, who would not normally otherwise be in your life, and they are very interested in your personal assets or your business dealings or even just your life in general, that's something to watch out for, that big red flag. It doesn't mean you cannot make new friends, but if you make a new friend and all of a sudden they're asking you about your bank accounts or how you own your house, or they're offering to do things for money for you, um, I would be very suspicious, and I would hope that everyone else would as well.
It's just hard to believe that somebody could sell your house out from under you and you don't even realize any of that is happening. I think
There was a false power of attorney involved with that, and we can talk a little bit more about different legal documents and how you can properly set things up to have people support you. There was someone at the escrow company who was helping this transaction along, but yes, it is hard to believe. I had a matter here in Colorado maybe about 10 years ago with an entity whom I shall not name. Again, it was an older person who the person representing this company showed up at her door with, I don't know, a casserole or something. And she said, "Who are you? Why are you bringing me food?" She said, "Well, I'm from such and such company. We just want to come say hi." She said, "Great, whatever." Came back a few more times, ended up, she thought she was signing a lease. It was a deed
oh,
selling the
wow.
property. Yeah, and there are things that I can do to say, "Okay, stop, we're not doing this, we're not gonna let the sale go through," which fortunately got to me in time to do. But it's always this pattern I see of someone just kind of appearing. And it's not like, "Hey, this is my very trusted close friend, and this is their friend, and let's have lunch."
Right.
It's an appearance out of nowhere. It's very similar to what I do see with other clients. I mean, those are specific real estate related fraud transactions. Um, I have a client who unfortunately lost a great deal of money because he answered texts which came out of nowhere. And I don't know about you, but these have come in a lot lately on my
Yes.
phone. The "Hi, how are you doing?" It's like, "Oh, come on, delete and report, Jack." And I personally have trouble seeing text, so a lot of times I just don't see them come in anyway, which could be the same for, the people listening to this podcast. But it's that third party out of nowhere want to be your friend, and my first question is why. My husband laughs at me because he says, "You're so suspicious sometimes," but I figure a little suspicion goes a long way. And my friends don't ask me about my finances or my bank accounts or property I own. So, yeah.
Yeah. So that's good to know. And recognizing those things, are there things a person can do to make themselves less attractive to a fraudster so that they don't become a target?
Absolutely. And I should note that Much like violence against women, unfortunately, a lot of fraud comes from inside the family as well. And I have seen children record fraudulent deeds that are with forged signatures. I have seen deeds that people don't know what they're signing. Different way of dealing with that. But to make yourself less attractive to a fraudster, my number one rule for anyone is take a breath. If someone's asking you for something, just urgency is a big marker of fraud. Right? We've all seen those or gotten, usually they're not calls, but they're emails or texts. Oh my gosh, fill in the blank, bank has frozen your bank accounts if you don't
Right.
respond within 24 hours. Yeah. I think it was maybe 6 or 7 years ago, there was a scam going around with people calling, pretending to be from the IRS. The IRS will never call you. They always send letters. People called me about this and I started giggling, saying the IRS never calls. And then more people called me and I stopped giggling because I felt terrible. But that kind of urgency, always take a breath. Anyone who is a professional or fiduciary, financial manager, attorney will never pressure you. They will say, hey, here's what I see going on. And you'll have that relationship with that person too. There are a good number of my clients who don't have kids, don't have siblings or siblings they can trust. And I am one of the people they rely on because sometimes I'll get a call, hey, I got this email. I say, yeah, that's a scam, ignore it. But within that trusted framework of people, always take a breath. Doesn't matter who's calling you, emailing you, texting you. It's extraordinary to me as an older Gen Xer thinking about all these stimuli we get, all this stuff coming in from various areas. Take a breath, take a step back, and take some time. Nothing is so urgent that it cannot wait a day. Um, Aside from that, just making sure that you don't get pushed into something quickly, it's really good to have at least one trusted person. And that could be a professional like me, it could be a sibling, it could be a child, it could be multiple children, people who you intrinsically gut level trust to manage your affairs if you cannot. Um, and in terms of legal structures, there are powers of attorney, separate powers of attorney for medical decisions and for financial, and those can be very specific, very broad, very limited. That is, they can be exactly what you need to be. You don't have to give blanket authority to someone. And you don't have to give authority to someone to act right away. You can say, look, I'm only giving you this authority when I am incapacitated.
Right.
There are certain types of trusts that can be used if you want to put all of your assets into one legal basket and give it to someone else to carry and manage if you cannot. Although personally, I think trusts can be overrated and expensive and not appropriate for everyone. There's a myth that I take this opportunity to bust every single time someone talks to me, so I apologize in advance. But probate, for instance, with a will in Colorado is very private, simple, and inexpensive. You don't need a trust for your estate plan if you live in Colorado. Unless you are very wealthy, you need estate tax planning, you own property in other states, you are incapacitated and need to deal with it that way. But trusts can be overrated. They're great for certain situations. If you are truly incapacitated, which you would not have the capacity to listen to this podcast right now, a guardianship or conservatorship or both would be appropriate. And that literally takes your decision making away, puts it in someone's hands by court order. So it's a very, I don't want to say extreme, but it's a very powerful tool that is not appropriate in many situations. But I have seen on occasion someone petition for guardianship when they should not, with ulterior motives. And the court will put the kibosh on that. But that's another option. One option, supported decision making agreements. Now, these came about in Colorado in 2021. Other states have had them for a little while longer, I think about 15 states right now. And they're not powers of attorney. They don't give someone authority to do something in your place. But they emphasize two things very strongly: community and trust. And I love that about them. And not trust like a trust agreement, but literally person to person trust.
Trust between the people.
Yes. And they are for anyone 18 or over who has a disability. And that is very broadly defined. It is a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more life activities. That's us right here, right? So it's voluntary decision making. And it requires a written agreement, but there's no statutory form for it. There are just certain requirements. So it can be as broad or as limited as you need or want it to be, but it identifies one or more persons. They're identified as a member of the supportive community, which is way too long a phrase for my liking. So I'm just going to call it a person. And it's supported decision making. So it's a bridge between total independence, like where we're at now, and having a power of attorney or even a guardianship that puts someone in your place to make decisions. It literally identifies a person legally who supports you and who can communicate the decisions you make to other people if that person authorizes it. So it's a really good thing. They're new and untested. A lot of people don't know about them. But to me, it's part of that framework that can be in place to head off the fraud to begin with. So say you don't have kids or parents or siblings, but you have an extremely good friend and you know they've got your back, you've got theirs. You can enter into this agreement and identify that person. And then if you get some text that says, hey, we haven't talked for a long time, let's chat, but you have no clue who it is, you can reach out to this person and say, I got this text, help me decide what to do with it because I don't feel comfortable deciding this on my own. I feel like I want to respond. And this person ideally will come back and say, oh, heck no,
Don't do
don't
that.
respond to that. And we're going to report this to the Attorney General's office so they can follow up on it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's like a great in-between place.
Yeah.
Where you can get some support and assistance, but you're not having somebody actually making all the decisions for you.
Exactly, because especially with such a broad definition, it's important for me to point out that disability and incapacity are two very, very different things. A physical disability can be something that you'll have to deal with in your life, especially vision loss. But it doesn't mean you have any less cognitive or capacity whatsoever. But you could have someone you trust to say, "Hey, I need you to read this to me. I need you to help me decide what to do with it. I need this in an accessible format," which I have to admit I am sort of ignorant about. I need to educate myself on accessible formats for low vision folks. But all of those things, I really like that you don't have to just go all the way to some other solution, that you can have this in between. It is important that you do need to have this in a written agreement. It has to be either witnessed by two people and notarized. So there are, which actually is the same standard for a will in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
So there are things, boundaries, bumpers around it to make sure that it's formal and recognizable. But there's also a provision in the set of statutes that enacted this that says, look, a third party relying on this, you're not going to be liable. So if you take it to a bank, they're not going to turn it away. They're going to say, all right, sometimes I've had to write little educational letters to banks saying, no, you need to honor this and you're not going to be in trouble if you do. But yes, I love that there are the court calls them less restrictive alternatives. So the solutions that don't involve a guardianship or conservatorship.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's really great for people to know because, well, many of us, thinking my husband, don't want to think about all these, types of planning and end of life and things, but thinking about what you want and who you trust and what you want them to do and when can be important because you want to make that decision or those decisions before you
Yes.
should you become incapacitated. And sometimes that is also educating. Sometimes it is assumed if you have a disability that you lack capacity in some form. And it's like, no, that's not the case. But you may need some types of help or things put into accessible formats and things like that.
Oh, yeah. And don't get me on my soapbox about especially people with non-visible disabilities or anything like that, and how just there's almost always an immediate assumption of, well, you're not going to understand this, and I don't get why that is. I'm laughing when you mention your husband because I just updated our estate plan, and my husband looks at me and says, "I really don't like to think about this." I said, "I take it for granted. I do this
all the
sometimes
time.
7 days a week." Yeah. And it just never bothers me. But no one likes to contemplate their own mortality, or worse yet, their own incapacity.
Mm-hmm.
Dying is one thing. Incapacity is a whole other thing.
That's true. That's true.
Yep.
Well, and you touched on it as, as folks are looking, well, who is my trusted person? For individuals like me who doesn't, I do not have children, then I am maybe looking at some other family member or a friend. But sometimes it's just assumed if you have children that that child or one of the children will be your trusted person. But I know sometimes, that is not the case. And as you said, sometimes it is, whether it's a child or sibling or some other family member, sometimes they are the person that's actually, stealing or taking things. I know that happened with a friend of mine with her mom. Her sister actually was posing as helping, and then they realized things were starting just to go missing, and had to deal with all that. And it was such a painful thing. Nobody wants to think that their child would seek to do harm to them.
No, and it's sadly enough, it comes from inside a family quite often, and sometimes it's just people behaving very badly. Sometimes it's a child who, whether it's chemical dependency or substance abuse, acts in ways that are not helpful to themselves or family members. But I do find myself in the position sometimes of telling clients, all right, I know this is your kid. I cannot recommend that they be in a trusted capacity for you. And here's why. And let's talk about it. But here are some other options I think would be better. Sometimes for clients, if they have the finances to support it, that means hiring a third-party fiduciary. There are organizations, some of them nonprofit, some of them for-profit, that will be an agent under a power of attorney or will act. Now, a member of the supportive community under a supported decision-making agreement that we talked about earlier is prohibited from receiving compensation, which I think is actually pretty cool.
Yes.
I haven't seen that written into a statute before. But if it's an agent under power of attorney or even a guardian or conservator appointed by a court, there are places that are trustworthy and will do that, but they do charge for it. But yeah, sometimes I have to tell people your kid's not the best choice. Doesn't mean you have to disinherit them, but they shouldn't be in charge of administration.
Right. Well, as you've worked with clients over the years, do you see certain types of fraud be more common among folks who are blind or have some level of vision loss?
I haven't seen anything specific to the low vision or blind community, but I would be particularly worried about making sure you know what you're signing. Whether that be, don't ever just, unless it's someone like me, and I would never even do this anyway, no one should put something in front of you and say, just sign this.
Right.
You should be able, it should be translated to Braille, it should be me out here because I don't know if there's a way to verbally transcribe or.
Yeah, so documents sometimes, if there's a digital copy, could be read by a screen reader if a person uses a screen reader, or
there we go,
or read by a person that they trust.
Yep. Yeah. So okay, thank you for articulating that for me. Anything that helps you to well, not only helps you understand what you're signing, but you always need to know exactly what you're signing. When it comes to complicated documents like wills or trusts, I would sit down with a client and walk through the entire darn thing. Just to make sure, it's very important to me that my clients always know exactly what I'm doing for them, what they're signing, what those documents do, short and long term. And estate plans are kind of living, breathing things. There's some clients I talk to each year. There's some clients I see every 3 to 5 years because families change, situations change. You might have a child who is incredibly responsible and trustworthy, and they may connect with a significant other, whether by marriage or otherwise, and suddenly that could change for the worse.
Mm-hmm.
And you might have to update your plan to remove them from any fiduciary or trustworthy capacities. Ideally not, but unfortunately, I see that happen a lot, and parents don't follow up, and there's a bad influencer in the family, and then that's when I start seeing deeds getting recorded. But for blind or low vision populations, I would say always know what you're signing, know what it does, and if your gut's telling you something's up, listen to that. Those are your other senses filling in and saying, something's not right here. Take that breath, take that step back.
So if a person suspects they're being defrauded, and maybe they like the lady with the guy mowing her lawn, suddenly they realize, oh, this has gotten to a place I wasn't anticipating. I think this person is actually defrauding me. What steps should a person take then?
My number one step, the first question I always ask people is, do you feel safe? Do you feel physically safe? Because sometimes these situations can result in physical violence. Almost always the answer I get to that is yes, I feel safe. I would call law enforcement, and I wouldn't hesitate to call 911 because they will connect you with, depending on your disability status, depending on your age, you could be defined as a vulnerable adult under state law. And there are divisions within county offices that deal with that. And that's especially, if you don't feel safe, always just call 911, always. And that's you're not overreacting. If you feel unsafe, that's what it's there for. My next step would be call your trusted person. If you have a trusted person, reach out to that person first. You don't necessarily need to call law enforcement. If someone, a lot of my clients will call me. I wish this one client I referred to had reached out before they sent a lot of cash to someone. That cash exited the country quickly, and that's where our tracing stopped. But someone can call me. I actually have a couple of private investigators I work with to try to track down assets. Sometimes you can, oftentimes not. But really reaching out to someone for help. It's don't feel like you can't do that. That's going to depend on who you have. But even if you don't have a trusted person, you don't have an agent under power of attorney, an attorney, a financial advisor, you can always just reach out to county law enforcement. That'd be my first step, and say, hey, this person's been appearing. If you call and say, hey, I've been getting texts, they're probably not going to help you. But if someone appears at your door or calls you personally more than once, they will send someone out. They'll take a report. And then, the next time this person contacts you, you can say, please know who you are. And they'll ideally leave you alone. Yeah.
That's good advice. Well, and sometimes the person, if it is, whether it's a family member or some other type of caregiver, if that is a person that they feel like is defrauding them, that can often be scary because they're reliant on that person.
Absolutely. And in that situation, if it's a family member or caregiver, I would hope that they have someone like me to reach out to. If it's a caregiver and you're receiving 24-hour care, it can be really hard to find yourself in a position to make a phone call that's private. In which case, sometimes if you are able to use email or texts, that can work, but the caregiver may have access to your phone. I have never found myself in this situation, but I have colleagues who have taken calls from people, and it has literally been a very rushed, like, oh gosh, you need to help me. That is scary. If it is a caregiver, please reach out to law enforcement, because that will be Adult Protective Services. Sometimes they act quickly, sometimes they don't. It depends on how bad things are. Caregivers are mandatory reporters, but if they are defrauding you, they're not going to report it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and hopefully people don't find themselves in that situation, but it could happen.
But if you do, law enforcement it's hard if you have a disability that restricts your ability to verbally communicate or that restricts your ability to move. That can be scary, and those are difficult situations to address.
Are there statewide services or local services that would help people navigate things like their deeds and contracts, finances, if they need help kind of in these areas?
Yeah. Unfortunately, there is an enormous lack of legal services for low-income folks. Colorado Legal Services would be my first stop. And there are attorneys who do pro bono work. I volunteer my time with the Tribal Wills Clinic, which is outside of the scope of this. But Colorado Legal Services would be good. Not all attorneys are super expensive. It would be good to have at least consult with an attorney in this situation. I am unfortunately not familiar with extensive resources for these issues without going to someone in pain for the work, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I apologize for that.
No, I think that's just kind of a gap and
it's
kind of nonprofit services that are available. There's not a lot of that.
Well, if I win the lottery, you know what I'm going to start at. Yeah. I'd have to play the lottery first, but yes.
Well, there's that, but
yeah. Well, and if you have someone that needs this kind of resource, reach out to me because I will look. And a very good retired colleague of mine just retired from Colorado Legal Services, but I still have connections and people I can call. The Center for Persons with Disabilities actually comes to mind too, CFPD in Denver. They are wonderful folks, and they may have some good resources too. I think I'll say one more time because I couldn't emphasize it enough, is don't feel like you can't call law enforcement, especially if someone's showing up physically, which doesn't seem to happen as much anymore with access to digital phishing and spamming and all of these words that I don't always know. But now, if it's real estate fraud, as someone has recorded something against title to your property that is fraudulent, that one's going to have to go through someone like me to deal with. It's pretty specialized. But I also have a lot of tools in my toolbox to address that.
That's great. Well, so people really shouldn't feel like they're all alone, that there are resources. And I think, again, we can't emphasize enough to try to find a trusted person.
Yeah, but they're not alone. Even if they call you up or they call Aftersight and say, hey, I need help, you know where to send them. I don't want anyone to feel like they're alone if this happens to them, because it's a terrible feeling to begin with that someone is breaking trust or stealing from you. Should always, it might take a little bit to get you the right person, but it's doable.
It's doable. Yeah, and people shouldn't feel embarrassed. I think sometimes that stops people, if they don't feel in physical danger, that stops people from reporting or reaching out.
But do it early, because that's when you can catch things, and that's when the fraudsters get caught themselves. And as opposed to later when they are in some foreign country with your money, living the high life. But absolutely, that feeling, and that's a very human feeling, right? Like, oh gosh, I was stupid. It's like, no, you're not stupid. You were victimized, and that's definitely never your fault.
No, and all of the scams and the people, the fraudster people are getting trickier and trickier and better at what they're doing. It's
which is why I always circle back to the take a breath.
Yeah,
seriously, if it's legitimate, it will wait, or there will be a phone call and you'll talk to someone you know. My husband at his office just recently received an email that was so incredibly sophisticated. He sent it to me, and I actually had to look at it for 10 minutes before I said, all right, this is not legit, and here's why. But, oh gosh, you're right. Things are sometimes pretty darn well done. And, you can always call too. If you get something that says it's from the IRS, okay, you might spend 2 hours on hold, but you can call them. More realistically, if you get a letter from, purporting to be from a company that you know and have an account with, you can always separately call the customer service line that connects to that company and say, is this legitimate? And If it is, they'll say yes. If not, get rid of that thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Heidi, for giving us all of this great information. I know it will help to keep folks safe out there. We're seeing fraud, even as a nonprofit, we're seeing fraudulent attempts sent to us as a nonprofit, and people saying they want to donate that turn out to be fraudulent and all sorts of things. Yeah, we'll have to talk.
No, we'll definitely talk about that. I am so sorry you're experiencing that.
And we have not had any issues, but it is frustrating, and I know, personally as individuals, we're all getting, whether it's texts or emails or, hopefully not so many people actually coming to your door, but those things happen. And just for people to be aware, you can always reach us at Aftersight through contact@aftersight.org, or you may call us. Our phone number is 303-786-7777. If you want to reach me, my extension's 4112. But definitely be safe out there, be cautious, find a trusted person for yourself. And as always, we hope all this information helps you to navigate your life with vision loss.
Turnware is proud to sponsor Aftersight's Navigating Life with Vision Loss podcast series. At Turnware, we provide managed IT services and custom-built hardware that help organizations stay secure and connected. We're honored to support these important conversations on safety, accessibility, and innovation. On behalf of Turnware and Aftersight, please enjoy this episode of Navigating Life with Vision Loss.